I still don't talk about this much. Most folks around Maryville figure I quit hunting because I got too old or too busy with the sawmill. But the truth is simpler than that. There's a piece of the Smokies I ain't stepping foot in again. Not for $1,000,000. Not if you put a gun to my head. It was November 2018. The rut just starting to heat up. And I'd taken a week off to chase a big 8-point I'd been seeing on trail cams up near Thunderhead, way back off 20 Mile, where the ranger station quits pretending they patrol. I'd like hunting alone, always have. You move quieter, think clearer, and the woods talk to you different when there ain't another human mouth to drown 'em out. I'd hiked in the evening before, 3 hard miles up a ridge so steep the old-timers call it the Devil's Staircase. Set my wall tent in a little saddle where 2 Laurel hills come together, a spot flat enough to sleep but choked so thick with rhododendron you couldn't see 20 yards in any direction. Good cover, I thought. Deer feel safe moving through that stuff. I ate a cold supper, hung my pack, crawled into the bag early because I wanted to be glassing the far slope at first light. Dawn came in cold and gray, the kind of quiet where your own heartbeat sounds loud. I eased out of the tent with just my rifle and binoculars, left the stove unlit so no smoke would drift, climbed a little knob maybe 60 yards above camp, and settled in behind a blowdown facing east across a narrow cove. The ridge opposite was still black with shadow, but the sky behind it was turning that thin winter pink. I was sweeping the tree line slow, looking for movement, when it hit me. That feeling you get when somebody's staring at the back of your neck in church, only stronger, patient, like whatever was watching had all the time in the world and knew it. I didn't jerk around. You learn not to do that hunting. Instead, I eased my head real slow, like I was just shifting weight, and let my eyes drift left toward the laurel thicket that crowded the knob on my downhill side. At first, I didn't see anything but leaves and shadow. Then 3 shapes separated themselves from the green, crouched low the way a coyote will when it's trying to decide if you're food or threat. Human shapes, but wrong. Naked, skin the color of river clay, hair matted down with mud and leaves like they'd been rolling in it for camouflage. Their heads were tilted at the exact same angle, all 3, like dogs listening to a whistle only they could hear. Eyes big, reflecting what little light there was. They never blinked, just watched. I've seen black bear at 30 yards that didn't give me the chill those 3 did. My hands went cold on the rifle. I thought about swinging it up, putting the scope on them to get a better look, but something told me that would be a mistake. Like the second I treated them as a target, the rules would change. So I sat still, breathing through my nose, counting heartbeats. Must have been a full minute. Then, without any signal I could catch, they sank straight backward into the laurel. No rustle, no snapped twig, just gone, like the thicket opened up and took 'em. I waited another 10 minutes, glassing every shadow, but nothing moved. Finally, I eased back down to camp, walking backwards half the way so the thicket stayed in sight. My coffee that morning tasted like metal. All day I hunted careful, staying high on the ridges where the laurel was thinner. Never saw those shapes again, never found a track. But I couldn't shake the feeling I was being paced. Every time I stopped to glass, the woods went too quiet, like the birds had been warned. By evening, I was spooked enough that I built my fire bigger than I liked, stacked dead hemlock till it roared. I sat up late with the 30-30 across my lap, feeding the flames, listening. Around about midnight, the temperature dropped hard. You could feel the frost settling. That's when I heard the first footstep. Soft, bare skin on leaves, circling maybe 40 yards out. Then another, and another. Never hurried, never random, like whoever it was knew exactly how close they could come without showing themselves in the firelight. I'd catch a pause, shine my headlamp that direction, and the sound would pick up again on the opposite side, patient as death. This went on for hours. Sometimes the steps were so light I wasn't sure I heard them at all, just the suggestion of a weight shifting from one foot to the other. Once, I swear, something sighed, real low and disappointed, like a child told to come inside. I never slept, kept the fire blazing till the wood was gone, then sat in the dark with the rifle and the headlamp on red mode so it wouldn't ruin my night vision. Toward morning, the circling stopped. Everything went still except the pop of dying coals. I waited till the sky behind the ridge turned that sickly pre-dawn gray before I crawled out of the tent, shotgun in one hand, pistol on my hip, feeling 70 years old instead of 42. The ground around camp was soft from recent rain. My boot prints from the evening before were plain, deep lugs heading to the spring and back. But overnight, something had walked them smooth. Every track I'd made coming in and out of camp was pressed over with smaller bare footprints, toes sprayed wide, heel almost not touching. One set walked right up to the tent door, paused, then turned and went back the way it came. The prints went maybe 30 yards toward the Laurel thicket and just quit. No scuff, no deeper impression where somebody jumped or was lifted, just ended. I stood there a long time staring at those tracks, frost starting to glitter on the leaves. Something about the care they'd taken, the patience, made my stomach turn worse than any scream in the night could have. These weren't people acting wild. These were people who'd never been tamed to begin with. And sometimes, when I wake up at 3 a.m. with the house too quiet, I wonder if they ever finished counting. I've never told this story start to finish to anybody, not even my wife. Jake and me swore we'd take it to our graves, but he passed 2 winters ago from the cancer, and keeping it bottled up feels heavier now than carrying it ever did. So here it is, plain as I can make it. Back in the fall of 2014, Jake and I were both 31, still dumb enough to think we were invincible, and still chasing the kind of views you can't get from a postcard. We'd heard about the old Shuckstack fire tower on the Appalachian Trail, abandoned since the 80s, half the stairs rusted through, but the cab at the top sits right on the spine of the Smokies and looks straight down into Fontana Lake one way and North Carolina the other. Perfect spot for sunset shots with the new camera Jake had just dropped too much money on. We figured we'd hike in from 20 Mile, climb the tower, spend the night if we felt like it, hike out the next morning. Easy overnight, maybe 12 miles round trip. Nothing we hadn't done a dozen times before. We hit the trail about noon, packs light, joking the whole way up like always. The leaves were peak that year, blood red, orange so bright it hurt to look at. The tower shows up sudden when you break out of the trees, 80, maybe 90 feet, a steel skeleton, painted that faded Forest Service green, swaying just enough in the wind to remind you it's been forgotten a long time. The first flight of stairs was missing half its treads. We had to hop gaps and pull ourselves up by the railings. Higher we went, the worse it got. Some steps were only angle iron with the grating long gone. Wind whistled through the thing like a mouth organ. By the time we reached the cab, little 12 by 12 room with windows on all sides, we were laughing from nerves more than anything, slapping rust off our hands, feeling like kings of the world. We dropped packs, cracked a couple beers we'd carried in frozen, and set up Jake's tripod. Sun was still high enough that the light was harsh, so we figured we had 2-3 hours to kill. Ate some jerky, talked about work, women, the usual. Every now and then the tower would creak and shift, but that's normal for those old things. You get used to it. Around 4:30, the shadows started stretching long across the ridges, and the lake turned that deep cobalt color that makes you understand why people write poems. Jake was fiddling with filters, I was leaning on the railing just soaking it in, when we heard the first clang. Metal on metal, deliberate, way down below. Not wind. We both froze and looked at each other. Probably another hiker, we said. Lots of people know about Shuckstack. But then it came again. Clang, pause, clang. Slow, like somebody testing each step before they trusted it. Jake leaned over the rail and called down, "Hey, plenty of room up here." No answer, except another clang, closer now. We waited. The sound kept coming, steady, unhurried. I stuck my head out and looked straight down the stairwell that runs up the middle of the tower like a spine. At first, all I saw was rust and shadows. Then, a shape moved across one of the lower landings, human, but wrong. A woman, I think, though it was hard to tell at that distance. She was on all fours, climbing the open grating stairs face down toward us, head hanging so low her hair dragged across the metal with every movement. She wasn't using her hands at all, just knees and the balls of her feet, pushing herself up like some kind of insect. What clothes she had left were rags the color of dirt, flapping loose around her bony frame. Jake whispered, "What the hell?" and pulled me back inside the cab. We didn't speak after that, just watched through the windows as she kept coming. The tower swayed worse with her weight, creaking loud enough I thought the whole thing might fold. But she never sped up, never looked up, just that slow, patient climb, hair swaying like wet rope. When she passed the halfway mark, we could hear her breathing, wet, raspy, like a smoker who'd walked too far. Sometimes she'd pause on a landing, lift her head a little, sniff the air, then keep going. We slammed the cab door, old wooden thing swollen with decades of rain, and shoved the rusty bar latch across. Jake was cursing under his breath, digging in his pack for the little .38 he carried. I just stood there with my knife in my hand, feeling useless. The footsteps got louder, metal ringing right under us now. Then they stopped. Dead quiet, except for wind. We waited. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Nothing. Jake started to say maybe she'd turned around when something thumped against the floorboards directly beneath our feet. Then another thump, slower. She was crawling up the last flight, the one that leads to the trapdoor we were standing on. We backed against the windows, hearts hammering so loud I could hear his over mine. The thump stopped again. Silence stretched so long I almost convinced myself she'd gone. Then the scratching started. Not nails on wood, more like palms sliding slow, feeling for the edges of the trapdoor. We stared at the hinges as they flexed, just a hair. Whatever strength she had wasn't enough to lift it with us standing there, thank God. The scratching moved away, and we heard her circle the catwalk outside, bare feet slapping dust. Jake raised the pistol, hands shaking bad. I told him to save the rounds. 6 shots weren't gonna matter if that door came open. She went around once, twice, slow. Then stopped right in front of the windows facing Fontana. We couldn't help it. We looked. She was crouched on the narrow walkway, head still hanging, hair covering most of her face, skin gray and filthy, ribs showing plain. When she lifted her chin, the hair parted, and we saw her eyes, pale, milky almost, but fixed right on us. Then she smiled. Not a human smile. Lips peeled back too far, showing teeth that looked filed down to points, dark with rot or blood or both. She pressed her face to the glass, nose flattening, breath fogging it up in wet bursts. Her hand came up slow, fingers too long, nails black and split, and laid flat against the window. Then she just stayed there, staring, smiling, head cocked, like she was listening to something we couldn't hear. Jake and I didn't move, didn't speak. The sun dropped behind the ridge, and the temperature fell fast. You could feel the cold leaking through the glass where her palms were. She never blinked. After a while, the fog from her breath started freezing on the pane and little crystals around her mouth. Night came quick up there. No moon that night, just stars so thick they looked fake. We killed our headlamps and sat back to back in the middle of the floor, pistol and knife ready, listening to her shift her weight every so often on the catwalk. Sometimes she'd drag her nails across the glass, slow, like tracing our outlines from outside. Once, close to morning, she made a sound, half laugh, half cough, that echoed inside my skull for weeks afterward. We didn't sleep, couldn't, just waited for the sky to go gray. When the first real light hit, the smiling stopped. We heard one soft thump as she dropped to all fours again. Then the slow clang of descent beginning. Jake risked a look out the window. She was going back down the same way she came, head first, hair dragging, never looking up. Took her almost an hour to reach the bottom. When her shape finally disappeared into the trees, we waited another half hour to be sure. We opened the door careful, expecting her to rush us from the shadows, but the tower was empty. The stairs were wet in places, handprints and knee prints smeared in rust and dew. Up on the cab windows, every pane facing every direction had her handprints frozen onto the outside glass. Perfect outlines, fingers splayed wide. Some overlapped like she'd stood there a long time, pressing harder and harder. They're probably still there. Steel and glass, don't forget the way people do. We climbed down faster than we climbed up, jump in the missing steps, slide in on the railings, hit the trail and damn near ran the 6. I still drive past that turnoff on Highway 28 sometimes, the one that drops down to the little gravel forest road outside Bryson City. And every time I do, my hands tighten on the wheel, like the truck remembers what my mind tries to forget. It was late August 2017, one of those thick, still nights where the air feels like wet cotton and the cicadas scream themselves hoarse. I'd been fishing Little Snowbird Creek after work, nothing serious, just wetting a line for native brookies in a stretch so far back the map quits bothering with contour lines. Most folks don't go up there after dark. The road washes out every big rain, and cell service died 10 miles earlier. But I liked it that way. The fish bite better when the only light is what God hung in the sky, and a man can hear himself think. I'd parked my old Chevy at the end of the drivable gravel, hiked in another 1.5 miles with a headlamp and a stringer, following a grown-over logging spur the timber companies cut in the 60s. Place was all second-growth poplar and hemlock now. Laurel so thick in spots you had to crawl. I found me a good hole where 2 branches joined, sat on a rock, and fished till the moon came up fat and orange over the ridge. Caught 8 or 9 pretty little speckled trout, enough for breakfast. By 11:30 the bite slowed and the mosquitoes were eating me alive, so I figured I'd head out, fry them fish at home with a beer and call it a night. That's when I heard the singing. It drifted down the hollow, soft at first, easy to mistake for wind in the leaves if you weren't really listening. Children's voices, high and clear, 5 or 6 of them, singing Ring Around the Rosie in that old-timey round way where one group starts and the others overlap. Not the playground version most kids know today either. They were using the longer one my granny sang, the one that ends ashes, ashes, we all fall down, real slow and drawn out like a warning. I smiled at first, thought maybe some family was camping deeper in than I'd figured, though I hadn't seen a single track of campfire glow all evening. Sounded sweet almost, the way kids' voices do when they're not trying to be heard by adults. I killed my headlamp to save the battery and started walking out, boots quiet on the pine needles, stringer over my shoulder. The singing kept on, same volume, same distance behind me, like whoever it was had decided to follow at a polite interval. I wasn't scared yet, just curious. I stopped once, cupped a hand to my ear. The voices stopped too, mid-word. Dead quiet, except crickets. I waited maybe 30 seconds, took another step, and they picked up again, exactly where they left off. That's when the little hairs on my neck lifted. The logging road I was on is straight for the most part, but narrow, maybe 8 feet wide, with laurel walls higher than my head. Moonlight came down in patches, enough to see the ground, but not much else. I kept walking, little faster now, telling myself it was nothing, just kids horsing around. But the more I listened, the stranger it got. They never stumbled over the words, never laughed, never called to each other like children do. Just that perfect round, over and over, sweet as Sunday school and cold as creek water. And they stayed the same distance back, no matter how quick I moved, like they knew exactly how fast a grown man walks when he's trying not to run. Half a mile in, the road dips through a low spot where fog likes to settle. I hit that fog, and the air turned 10 degrees colder, damp enough to taste. The singing was closer now, close enough I could pick out individual voices. A high one that carried the melody, a couple thinner ones doing harmony, one little voice that always came in half a beat late, like it was learning. I turned my headlamp back on, swung the beam behind me. Nothing but gray mist and tree trunks. The light didn't seem to reach as far as it should have. I called out, "Y'all all right back there?" Real calm, like you do when you don't want to spook kids. The singing quit instantly. Silence pressed in so hard my ears rang. I stood there a minute, heart thumping, waiting for a parrot to answer or a dog to bark or anything human. Nothing came. Then, soft as a breath, the round started again, closer this time, close enough that if I'd turned quick, I might have seen him. I didn't turn, just started walking fast, headlamp bouncing, stringer slapping my leg. The voices kept pace. The next 2 miles felt like 20. Every bend I expected to see a tent or a truck or something that explained it, but the road stayed empty. My shadow jumped ahead of me, long and twisted, and sometimes I thought there were smaller shadows dancing at the edges of the beam, keeping just out of sight. The singing never got loud, never threatening. That was the worst part. It stayed pretty, almost kind, like they were trying to comfort me while they followed. Once or twice I caught a whiff of wood smoke, old and sweet, the kind you smell from a cabin chimney miles away. But there ain't been a house up that hollow since the CCC left in the 30s. I don't mind telling you I was praying under my breath by the time the road widened out to the gravel pull-off where I'd left the truck. Not fancy prayers, just Lord, please, over and over like a scratched record. Cried from relief. I threw my ride and stringer in the bed, jumped in the cab, slammed the door, and locked it fast. Only then did I look in the rear view. The singing stopped the second my door shut, cut off mid-word like someone pulled a plug. Silence rushed in so complete I could hear the ticks cooling under the hood. I sat there a long time, breathing hard, watching the fog drift between the trees. No movement, no flashlight beams coming up the road, nothing. After a while, I talked myself into getting out to check the fish, make sure the ice hadn't melted. That's when I saw the prints. The pull-off was dry dust over gravel, perfect for tracking. My boot prints came in from the day before, deep and clear. But crossing him, coming up the logging road, and stopping right at my tailgate were tiny barefoot prints, 5, maybe 6 sets, no bigger than an 8 or 9-year-old's. Toes splayed wide, like they'd never worn shoes a day in their lives. They walked sing file most of the way, then fanned out a little at the end, circled the truck once slow, and came together again, right behind the bumper. The last prints pressed deep, like the children had stood on tiptoe to see over the tailgate into the bed. Then, nothing. No prints walking away, no disturbance in the dust where they might have turned. Just stopped, like the ground opened them. I stared at those tracks till my eyes watered. The fish was still cold, still flopping faint on the stringer. Whatever looked at him hadn't touched a thing. I drove out with the windows up and the high beams on, truck slewing on the gravel like I was being chased. Made it to the highway, pulled over under a streetlight, and checked the bed again. Still just my footprints around the truck, nothing else. The little ones were gone, dust already filling them in, like they'd never been. I never went back to that creek, sold all my trout gear the next week. Some nights when the cicadas are loud and the moon is full, I still hear 'em in my head, those sweet overlapping voices singing their round, patient as the hills. And I wonder if they followed the truck all the way home that night, if they stood in the yard watching the windows till dawn, barefoot in the grass, waiting for me to come back out. Because children don't quit a game just because one player runs away. They just wait till you're ready to fall down again. I don't go to church anymore. Haven't since the summer of 2021, and most folks in Robbinsville figure it's because I got bitter or lazy or both. Truth is, every time I walk into a sanctuary now, I smell that damp earth smell, feel those old pine boards flex under my knees, and hear the soft scrape of something shifting in the dark underneath. Some things you can't unsee, and some places you can't unfeel, no matter how many hymns they sing over 'em. It started out innocent as a Wednesday picnic. I was 24 then, still helping out with the youth group at Laurel Branch Methodist, because Miss Linda wouldn't let me say no, and because I liked the kids. We'd taken on a mission project, clean up the old White Oak Methodist Church, 3 miles up a dirt road off the Snowbird Mountain, abandoned since the early 80s when the congregation dwindled down to 6 old women and a preacher who moved to Florida. The building had been sitting empty ever since, windows shot out by bored teenagers, roof half caved on the north side, pigeons living in the belfry. The deacons wanted to fix it up enough to sell, maybe turn it into a community center or let some artist from Asheville buy it for a studio. Our job was simple: rip out the mouse-chewed pews, pull the rotten floorboards in the sanctuary, sweep decades of bat guano, haul it all to the burn pile. Easy service hours, cold pop and pizza afterward. Kids were excited. We got there about 9 on a Saturday morning in July. Air already thick enough to chew, cicadas roaring like chainsaws. The church sat in a little flat spot ringed by laurel and poplar. Graveyard off to the left with headstones leaning like drunks. Place looked smaller than I remembered from childhood. White clapboard gone gray, steeple crooked, front doors chained, but the chain rusted so thin we snapped it with a pair of boat cutters. Inside smelled like wet hymnos and owl pellets. Sunlight came through the broken windows in dusty slats, lighting up floating moats that looked almost pretty till you breathed them in. The kids got right to work, laughing, prying pews loose, stacking them out in the yard. I took the 4 older boys, Cody, Mason, the twins Jacob and Josiah, and we started on the sanctuary floor. The pine boards were black with age and soft as sponge in places. We figured the joists underneath would be just as bad, maybe need sistering before anyone could walk in here again. Crowbars made quick work of it. Nails screamed coming up. Boards popped like old bones. We had maybe a third of the floor open, a dark rectangle yawning where the altar used to be. When Mason said the crawl space looked deeper than it should, I laughed and told him everything looks deeper when you're staring down into the dark, but he was right. Most church crawls are 2-3 feet to the dirt. This one dropped a good 5 or 6 feet, deeper toward the back wall, like somebody had dug it out years ago and never filled it back in. We shined our phone lights down there and saw nothing but packed red clay, a few broken bricks, and some ancient cobwebs thick as curtain lace. Smell came up strong, cold earth, animal musk, something sour like old milk. Cody joked about snakes and we all laughed, but the laugh felt thin. We kept pulling boards. That's when we heard it, a soft shift, like fabric dragging across dirt, way back in the far corner where our lights barely reached. Everybody froze. Jacob swung his phone that direction, and the beam caught a shape. A man, grown but curled tight, knees to chest, arms wrapped around him like he was hugging himself for warmth. Naked except for a crust of dirt and filth so thick it looked like skin itself. His hair was long, matted into ropes that hung over his face, but not enough to hide his eyes. Big, pale, reflecting the light like an animal's. He was staring straight up at us, head tilted just enough that I could see he hadn't blinked once. Not once. The kids made little gasping sounds. I felt my stomach drop clean through my boots. I told him to back up slow, voice shaking worse than I wanted. Cody had his phone up filming, of course he did, and the man's eyes tracked the movement without his head moving at all. I leaned over the edge and managed to get words out. "Sir, you hurt? You need help down there?" My voice echoed strange off the clay walls. He didn't answer, just uncurled one arm real slow, joints popping, and raised a finger to his lips. Long finger, nail black and split. The sound he made wasn't loud, more breath than voice, but it filled the whole sanctuary, like the building itself was telling us to be quiet. Then he moved, not stood up, not crawled, scuttled, backwards on hands and feet, belly to the ground, fast as a spider when the rock gets lifted. Phone lights tried to follow, but he melted into the dark corner where the cross space went under the foundation wall. Gone. Just a soft scrape of skin on clay fading away. We all stood there breathing like we'd run a mile. One of the girls outside started yelling, asking what was wrong, and that snapped us out of it. I sent Mason to call the preacher. Brother Paul was out by the burn pile and told the kids to get outside now. They didn't argue. I stayed at the edge a second longer, shining my light down, half expecting him to rush back out, but the hole stayed empty. Just that smell, stronger now, and something glinting in the dirt where he'd been curled up. Sheriff took almost an hour to get there. Robbinsville's a long way from anywhere. By then, Brother Paul had prayed over us twice, and the kids were huddled in the grass looking pale. Deputy Mills and his partner climbed into the cross space with flashlights and guns drawn, shouting Sheriff's Department till their voices went hoarse. They came back up filthy and quiet. Man was gone. No exit hole, no tunnel, just that deep pit ending at the foundation stones. But they brought up what they found. A pile of deer bones picked clean, some still wet, gnawed down to splinters like a dog had worried them for weeks. And one small leather shoe, child-sized, high-top style from the 50s maybe, laces rotted off, toe capped with metal. Inside was a little sock, gray with age, still shaped like a foot had been in it when it came off. They searched the woods all afternoon with dogs. Nothing. No tracks leading away from the church, no camp, no sign anybody had been living rough. The shoe went into an evidence bag, the bones too. Deputy told us later the lab said the gnaw marks were human teeth, adult, but worn strangely, like whoever did it had been chewing bones a long time. They checked missing persons back to the 70s. Nothing matched. Case stayed open about a week, then quietly closed for lack of evidence. We never finished the floor. Church got boarded up again, this time with new chains and a no trespassing sign nobody pays attention to. I didn't. I still see him clear as day. That pale face staring up, finger to lips, like we were the ones intruding, like we'd interrupted something private and sacred and wrong. Some nights I wake up smelling that cross-space dirt in my room. I'll sit straight up in bed, listening for scraping under the floorboards, because if a man can live 30 years under a church without anybody knowing, what's to say he can't find another quiet place, another set of footsteps walking overhead while he waits down below, patient as stone, finger to his lips. I still own the deed to that little cabin up on Beach Creek, but I ain't set foot on the property since the winter of 2019, and Lord willing, I never will again. Folks around Marshall think I lost my mind or got spooked by a bear, and I let them think it. Easier than trying to explain something that don't fit words right. The place was my granddad's hunting camp, handed down to my daddy, then to me when he passed in 15. Sat on 12 acres, a north-facing slope, steep enough that the snow stuck longer than down in the valley. One room with a loft, tin roof, stone chimney, and a porch that looked out over nothing but ridges folding into each other till the sky ran out. I loved it up there. Fixed it up slow. New windows, propane stove, a little solar panel for lights. Planned to retire there someday, maybe write the book I was always talking about. Spent every weekend I could from May to November, and when the first good snow came in December of 18, I decided to stay a full month. Work let me go remote, and I figured a man could get a lot of thinking done with nobody around but the crows. The snow started the night I got there. Big fat flakes drifting straight down like the mountain was being salted. By morning we had 8 inches and still coming. I shoveled the porch, split extra wood, made a pot of coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, and settled in. First week was pure peace, heavy quiet, fire popping, the occasional thump of snow sliding off the tin. I'd sit out on the porch in the dark with a quilt and a mug, watching the valley fill up white. You feel small in a good way up there, like the mountains are holding you instead of the other way around. Then came the night of the 14th. I'd gone to bed early, tired from chopping a dead hemlock all afternoon. Woke up sudden at 3:00-something, heart already racing before I knew why. The room was cold. Fire had burned down the embers. At first I thought the wind had picked up, but there wasn't a breath of air. What I heard was footsteps, bare feet, slow and deliberate, walking the ridge line on my roof. Not heavy, not hurried, just a soft, steady pad, pad, pad from the chimney in to the front eaves and back again. I lay there frozen, telling myself it was a coon or a possum, maybe a branch scraping, but I knew better. The rhythm was too even, too human. I eased out of bed quiet as I could, pulled on boots but no coat, and grabbed the 12-gauge from beside the door, pumped around into the chamber slow so the sound wouldn't carry. The walking never paused. I stepped out onto the porch, and the cold hit me like a slap. Had to be 5 below, snow still falling light. Moon was half full behind thin clouds, enough to see by. I looked up at the roof line, expect an eye shine or a shape to move, shotgun ready. Nothing, just a ridge cap white and smooth, snow piling soft. The footsteps kept going, right above my head now. Bare skin on tin muffled by the fresh powder, but unmistakable. Pad, pad, pad toward the back of the cabin. I walked the perimeter slow, boots crunching loud in my ears, breath fogging thick. Rounded the corner to the uphill side, where the ground rises almost to the eaves. Still nothing. No ladder, no tree close enough for anything to jump from. The walk encircled the whole roof twice while I stood there like a fool, gun pointed at empty air. Then it stopped, dead center over the loft. Silence came down heavier than the snow. I waited a long time, maybe 20 minutes, till my fingers went numb around the forestock. Finally, I went back inside, barred the door, built the fire up roaring, and sat in Morocco with the shotgun across my knees till the windows turned gray. Never heard another step all night. Morning came clear and brutal cold. Sun hit the ridge just enough to sparkle every flake. I drank coffee till my hands quit shaking, then went out to look. The snow on the roof was maybe 4 new inches on top of the old crust, perfect for tracks. And there they were. Bare footprints, plain as day, starting at the chimney and walking the peak the whole length of a cabin to the front eaves, then turning, without any scuff or wider stance, and walking straight back. Toes pointed clean and clear, only they weren't pointed the way toes are supposed to point. Every print had the heel toward the ridge line, and the toes aimed down the slope of the roof toward the edge, like whoever made them had been walking on the underside of the tin, belly to the joists, pressing up through the metal and snow somehow. The prints were deep on the balls of the feet, shallow at the heel, just like a man's weight would fall if he was hanging upside down under there. I stood in the yard staring up, mouth open, coffee going cold in my hand. The tracks went end to end 6 times, maybe 7, 3 round trips and then some. Then, right over the middle of the loft, they just quit. No slide, no deeper impression where weight shifted, No prince walking away across the roof to drop off. Just stopped, like the roof opened and whatever it was let go. I got the ladder out of the shed, set it shaky against the eaves, and climbed up with the shotgun slung and a flashlight in my teeth. The tracks looked even stranger close up. Long, narrow feet, toes splayed wide like they'd never been cramped by shoes. Snow inside the prints was packed hard, almost icy, and there was a faint smell coming off of them, sour and musky, like a crawl space nobody's opened in 50 years. I followed them to where they ended, brushed snow away from the tin underneath. No hatch, no loose panel, no way in from the top, just solid roof. The attic access is inside the loft, a little scuttle hole with a pull-down ladder. I hadn't been up there since September when I stored some extra blankets. I climbed down, moved the bed aside, and stared at that square of pine wood in the ceiling. Dust on it was thick and undisturbed, except for my own fingerprints from months ago. Whatever made those tracks hadn't come through there. I didn't open it. Can't tell you exactly why, except that some doors you know better than to open once you realize something on the other side might be waiting for you. The rest of that month I kept every light burning, radio on loud, axe by the bed along with the shotgun. Never heard the walking again, never saw another track, but the cabin didn't feel empty anymore. I'd catch movement out the corner of my eye, something ducking behind a woodpile, or a shadow stretching too long across the snow when the sun was behind me. Once I found the porch rocker swaying slow, though the air was dead still. Another morning, all the cabinet doors were open, cans turned label out like someone had stood there reading what we had. I lasted 2 more weeks. Then one dawn, I woke to find a single upside-down footprint pressed into the frost on the inside of the bedroom window, toes pointing down toward the seal, heel up near the top pane, like whatever it was had stood on the glass outside and leaned in to watch me sleep. I packed the truck that same day, took only what I could carry in 2 trips, left furniture, tools, half a cord of seasoned wood, drove out with the heat of blasting, and never looked in the rear view till I hit the blacktop. Place is still mine on paper. Taxes get paid automatic from the account. Sometimes I think about selling, but then I remember those prints ending in the middle of the roof with nothing underneath but empty attic, and I know no surveyor or buyer would ever set foot up there without me telling him why I left, and I ain't ready to tell that yet. Some nights when the wind is out of the north and the snow starts to fall, I sit straight up in bed in my apartment down in town, listening for bare feet on tin that ain't there. And I wonder if it's still walking that ridgeline every winter, patient as stone, waiting for the next set of headlights to come slow up the gravel road, waiting for somebody else to need the quiet so bad they don't mind sharing the dark. Because whatever it is, it don't need the floor. The ceiling's good enough. I still don't talk about Thanksgiving night 2019 unless I've had a couple pours of something strong enough to loosen the knot in my chest. Most folks around here already think I'm half-touched from living alone up on this ridge so long, and telling this would finish the job. But it sits in me like a splinter I can't dig out, and sometimes late, when the wind rattles the tin roof just right, I feel like I have to say it out loud, or it'll rot me from the inside. We had an ice storm 2 days before, bad one. Lines were down all over the county, trees split like matchsticks, roads glazed so thick you couldn't walk without sliding on your ass. Power went out Wednesday morning and never came back. By Thursday night I was running off a little generator in the shed, just strong enough for 1 lamp in the radio. Turkey was a couple of cans of ravioli heated on a propane stove, and I was fine with that. I'd rather eat cold pasta alone than drive down to any relative's house and pretend we still liked each other. House sits a good half-mile off the blacktop, up a dirt track that turns to mud 9 months out of the year and ice the other 3. Nearest neighbor's 3 miles as the crow flies, longer if you're foolish enough to walk it. Woods come right up to the backyard, old growth stuff, hemlock and poplar so thick the sun gives up before it hits the ground. I like it that way, always have. Quiet does some good for a man after the things I saw overseas. Around 9 o'clock, the generator coughed itself into a steady purr, and the lamp threw that weak yellow glow across the living room. Radio was nothing but static and some preacher out of Bluefield yelling about the end times. I killed it. Outside, the ice was ticking on the branches, soft as fingernails on a coffin lid. That's the only sound there was for hours. Then came the knock. One single knock. Not hard, not timid, just deliberate. Like whoever was on the other side of that door had all the time in the world and only needed to use one knock to get my attention. It wasn't the wind, wasn't a branch scraping. I knew the difference. I'd heard every light as mountain could tell a door. I waited. Nothing else came. No second knock, no voice calling out that they were stuck or hurt or needing a phone. Just that one soft rap hanging in the air like smoke. My .38 was on the coffee table. I always kept it close when the power went out and the dark got thick. I picked it up, eased over to the door, and looked through the peephole. Porch was empty. Motion light hadn't even tripped. Just the boards and the snow piled in the corners and the night beyond, black as wet coal. I stood there a long minute, listening so hard my ears rang. Nothing. Figured maybe a chunk of ice finally let go from the gutter and smacked the door. Happens sometimes. I opened it anyway. Cold rolled in like a slap. The yard was lit up just a little from the spill of a lamp through the screen. Maybe 20-25 feet of granny yellow before the dark swallowed everything. Snow was coming down again, and lazy and fat, sticking to the sleeves of my coat. That's when I saw him. 4 people standing right at the edge of the light, where the porch boards drop off into the yard. 2 adults, 2 kids, barefoot, every one of them. Tracks coming up through the snow from the direction of the woods, but faint, like they weighed half what they should. The man was tall, raw-boned, wearing overalls so old the denim had gone gray and soft as felt. No shirt underneath that I could see, just skin stretched tight over ribs. Woman beside him in a dress that might have been blue once, now to color a creek mud, him dragging in the snow. Kids, boy maybe 10, girl a couple years younger, had on little more than nightgowns, thin cotton gone transparent from wet. They feet were black with cold, but none of them were shivering, not the way a body ought to shiver when it's 10 degrees and you're standing barefoot on a storm. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight at me with eyes that caught the light wrong, too flat, like a deer's eyes at night, all shine and no depth. I found my voice. "You all right? You hurt?" Nothing. Wind moved a woman's hair across her face, but she didn't raise a hand to push it back. "Car run off the road?" I tried again. "Ain't nobody been up this way in 2 days, but you're welcome to come in by the stove." The man lifted his right hand slow enough I could have counted the cracks in his knuckles, and knocked once in the empty air between us. Same rhythm, exact same, soft, deliberate, final. My skin went colder and air. The little girl tilted ahead, just a fraction, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, all 4 of them turned, perfect together, like they shared one spine, and started walking back toward the woods. Bare feet sinking an inch or 2 with every step, but no swaying, no slipping on the ice, just straight, steady, into the dark. I should have closed the door, should have locked it, barred it, dragged the china cabinet in front of it and pretend I'd dreamed the whole thing. But I didn't. I stood there with the .38 hanging loose in my hand and watched a footprint stretch out across the yard. 20 yards, maybe 25, clear as day in the porch light. Then nothing. Tracks just stopped. No scuff, no slide, no deeper print where somebody jumped or was lifted. Just 4 sets of bare feet marching into the snow and gone. Like the ground opened up and took them, or like they stepped off the edge of the world and kept walking. I don't know how long I stood in that doorway, Long enough for the cold to crawl inside my bones and set up house. Long enough for the generator to sputter and the lamp behind me to dim. When I finally shut the door, my hand left a wet print on the knob. Melted snow or sweat, couldn't tell. I didn't sleep. Sat up in the living room with every light the generator could feed, gun across my lap, staring at the door like it might knock again. Around 3 in the morning, the ice stopped falling, and the quiet got heavier than I'd ever heard it. Quiet enough you could hear your own blood moving. Next day the sun came out weak and pale, and the county trucks finally cleared the road. Power stayed off another 2 days. I walked a yard a dozen times with a tape measure and a shovel, looking for sinkholes, for anything that might explain where those tracks ended. Snow was crusted hard, prints still there, 4 sets going, none coming back. At the spot where they vanished, I dug down 3 feet through ice and frozen dirt, hit bedrock, nothing. Sheriff's deputy came by on Saturday when the roads opened. Nice kid, grew up 2 hollers over. I started to tell him, then saw the way his eyes slid away when I mentioned barefoot people in the snow. He patted my shoulder and said, "Ice storms do funny things to a man's head, Mr. Carter. You need anything, you radio." Left me a thermos of coffee and drove off. I never told another soul in person. Not my sister, not the preacher, nobody. But sometimes when I'm down at the store getting feed or nails, I'll catch an old-timer looking at me too long. They know something. They always know. Because it ain't the first time something like this has happened up here. My granddaddy told stories about travelers who knocked once, and only once, back before the roads were paved. Said if you let him in, they'd sit at your table and eat whatever you put in front of him, but the food never went down. They'd just open their mouth and it fell through onto the floorboards, wet and steaming. Said if you followed their tracks, they always stopped the same way, like the mountain decided it was done with him and took him back. I still live in the same house. Generator's bigger now, and I keep the motion lights on all night, every night, even when the power's fine. Snow comes early some years, and when it does, I don't open the door for anything. Don't care if it's a trooper or a neighbor or Jesus Christ himself. One knock, and I sit real still, hand on the 38, waiting to see if it happens again. It hasn't. But every Thanksgiving, right around 9 o'clock, the lamp flickers, just once, like someone on the porch is blocking the light for a heartbeat. And out in the yard, if the snow's fresh and the moon is spin, sometimes I think I can see those prints starting up again from the edge of the woods. 4 sets, bare feet, heading straight for the house. They never make it all the way. They stop 20 yards out and wait. I've been hauling trash in Clay County since I got out of the Army in 2008. Same little knuckle boom truck, same loop through the mountains 3 days a week. Folks set they cans at the end of long driveways or just leave bags at the pull-offs when the road's too rough for me to turn around. Most of it's normal. Pizza boxes, diapers, beer cans, the usual. You learn not to look too close. People throw away things they don't want nobody remembering. But every once in a while, something sticks with you. Something that crawls under your skin and nests there. It was the first Tuesday in October 2020, the kind of morning where the fog hangs in the hollers like wet wool, and the sky don't decide if it's gonna burn off or rain. I was running the Cherahalla Skyway piece of my route, that high stretch where the pavement twists along the ridge between North Carolina and Tennessee. Air was cold enough to bite the lungs, leaves just starting to turn blood red on the maples. I came around a bend and saw 3 black contractor bags sitting neat in the pull-off at mile marker 11, the one with the busted guardrail and the top off straight down in the beach gap. No can, no note. Just 3 bags tied tight and lined up like soldiers. That happens sometimes. Hikers, campers, folks from the fancy cabins who don't want to drive all the way to the dump. I didn't think much of it. I hopped down, grabbed the first bag. Heavy, way heavier than household trash has any right to be. Felt like lifting a feed sack full of wet sand. Second and third were the same. I heaved the first one up on the tailgate to muscle it into the hopper, and the plastic split clean down the side with that sick rip sound cheap bags make. What spilled out wasn't food scraps or clothes. Hair. Human hair. Blonde, brown, black, red, every length and texture you can imagine. Some still in ponytails with those little rubber bands. Some braided, some in thick matted ropes like it had been cut off years ago and left a knot. It poured across the tailgate in a slow wave, steaming a little in the cold air, smelling like old beauty shops and something coppery underneath. My stomach flipped hard. I stood there staring, gloved hands frozen on the torn plastic, trying to make sense of it. Then something flooded out of the pile and landed face up in the mess. A Polaroid. Little boy, maybe 10, barefoot in the dirt, wearing nothing but a pair cut-off overalls 2 sizes too big. Skin pale as creek clay, hair shaved close to the scalp, except for a strip down the middle like a mohawk that never grew right. He was holding up fistfuls of hair to the camera like a kid proud of catching a string of fish, smiling wide with a mouth that had no teeth at all, just pink gums shining. Eyes big and dark, too big for his face, reflecting the flash flattened dead. On the white strip at the bottom, somebody had written in careful block letters with a blue pen. Almost enough. I dropped the picture like it burned me, stepped back so fast I near fell off the tailgate. The hair kept sliding out of the bag, slow and deliberate, piling up around my boots. I could feel strands catching on the laces, clinging like they didn't want to let go. I don't know how long I stood there breathing fog into the morning, but the next thing I knew I was on the radio calling the sheriff, voice cracking worse than when I was 14. Took him 45 minutes to get a deputy up the mountain. By then, I'd dragged the other 2 bags away from the truck and left him sitting exactly where I found him. Didn't want to touch him again. Deputy Reese rolled up with his lights off, took one look at the hair spread across my tailgate in the Polaroid land now, and went quiet the way lawmen do when they know it's bad. He took pictures, called it in, told me to wait in my cab. Another unit came, then a detective from Hayesville. They searched the woods, the ravine, the overlook, found nothing. No tire tracks but mine, no footprints leading away from the pull-off, no drag marks, just those 3 bags and what was in them. They took the hair, the photo, the torn bag, asked me 100 questions I didn't have answers for. I told them I'd never seen the boy, never noticed anybody watching me on the route, never had a single bag like that before. They ran the picture through whatever databases they've got now. Nothing. No missing kid matched, no priors, no facial recognition hit. The handwriting on the back didn't match either. Case stayed open maybe 2 weeks, then got filed under unsubstantiated dumping of possible human remains. That's what they called it, dumping. I tried to go back to work the next week. Couldn't do it. Every pull-off I came to, I'd slow down, expecting to see them black bags waiting. Every curve I took too fast, half convinced that toothless boy would be standing in the middle of the road holding up his handfuls, smiling. After a month, the county put me on a different route, the one down by the lake where there's houses and people and traffic. My boss never asked why, just said, some stretches ain't worth the wear on a man. But the thing that finished me was the envelope. 3 months later, right before Christmas, I found it tucked under the wiper blade on my truck one morning when I came out of the Waffle House in Murphy. Plain white envelope, no writing on the outside. Inside was another Polaroid. Same camera, same dead flash, same boy, same empty smile, but older now, maybe 12, 13. Standing in the exact same spot of bad dirt. He was holding up a single long braid of dark hair, woven with gray strands, my color, my length. On the back, in the same blue pen, "Thank you." I quit the route that day. Took a job driving a forklift in a warehouse in Georgia, 40 miles from the mountains. Still have both pictures locked in a safe deposit box I ain't opened since. Some nights I wake up smelling that beauty shop and copper smell, feeling strands of hair brushing my neck, even though I keep it buzz short now. And I wonder how much is enough, and what happens when he finally gets it. Because hair grows back. Everybody knows that. And he knows where I live. I still can't look at a headlamp the same way. I keep one in a truck, sure, because you have to, but it stays in a glove box with the batteries taken out. If I need light after dark now, I use a lantern or build a fire big enough to read by. Anything but that narrow white beam slicing a night open like a knife. It was June 2016, one of those stretches where life felt too loud and I needed the trail to quiet it down. I'd taken 10 days to walk the North Carolina section of the Bartram Trail alone, starting at Keogh Bald and heading west. By day 6, I was moving slow, savoring it, letting the miles strip everything off me that didn't matter. That evening, I climbed a spur up to Wayah Bald just before sunset. Most folks camped lower at the shelter, but I wanted the view from the old fire tower clearing. 360 degrees of nothing but blue ridges rolling out like frozen ocean waves. The stone observation tower the CCC built in the 30s still stands up there, door chained but the ramp intact. I set my tent in the grass 20 yards downhill from it, facing south so I could watch the sun drop behind the Nantahalas. Ate a cold supper of summer sausage and cheese, hung my bear bag, crawled in just as the last light bled out. Night came fast. No moon that night, just a thick spill of stars and the kind of dark that presses against your eyeballs. Wind was up, moving through the spruce at the Bald's crest like something breathing. I lay there listening to it, feeling good, tired, already half dreaming, when my headlamp, clipped to the tent ceiling so I could read if I wanted, started flickering. Not the usual end of battery stutter, more like someone was turning the switch on and off real quick. I reached up, clicked it once, nothing. Clicked it again. The beam came on bright, pure white, cutting straight down the slope toward the tree line, maybe 40 feet away. That's when I saw him. 6, maybe 7 figures standing just beyond where the light faded to black. Taller than any man I know. Thin like saplings, arms too long, legs too long, no hair anywhere that I could see. Skin pale, almost glowing in the way a fish belly does when you pull it from deep water. They weren't hiding, just standing there, loose-limbed, headed slightly cocked, watching. No clothes, no gear, no movement except a slow rise and fall of breathing. The wind was howling 20 miles an hour up there, but not one strand in the hair moved because there wasn't any, not even eyebrows. I froze with my thumb still on the switch. My own breath sounded like a freight train inside the tent. I told myself, bears, drunk hikers, tricks of the light, anything. Then one of them shifted its weight, and the grass around its feet didn't bend, like it was standing on top of the ground instead of in it. I swung the beam left, slow. The step when I put light on the closest one, it stepped backward exactly the distance the beam reached, smooth and silent, keeping perfect pace with the edge of the circle. I jerked the light right. 3 more did the same, melting back into the dark without a rustle, always staying just outside the glow. Every hair on my body stood up. I clicked the red mode, thinking maybe the white was too harsh and they'd come closer in a softer light. They didn't. They retreated again, matching the weaker throw at a red, heads tilted farther like dogs trying to understand a new command. I killed the light completely. Darkness slammed down so hard I gasped. The wind kept roaring, branches whipping overhead, but underneath it, nothing. No footsteps, no breathing but mine, no whisper of grass, just absolute silence from the direction they'd been standing. I sat there in the black, heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it, counting 200, then 200, waiting for my eyes to adjust. They never did. That high up on a bald with no moon, dark is dark. I could have reached out and touched one and never known till his fingers closed on my wrist. Minutes stretched like hours. I eased my knife out of its sheath, laid it across my chest, and tried to slow my breathing. Every few seconds I'd click the headlamp on bright and sweep the snorkel fast. Each time they were still there, same number, same distance, adjusted perfect to wherever the beam ended. Never closer, never farther, like they were tied to the light itself with invisible string. Once I caught a face full in the beam, smooth, noseless almost, eyes huge and black, reflecting the LED like wet stones. No expression, just curiosity, the way a child studies a bug before it pulls the wings off. I stopped turning the light on after that. Sat in the total dark with my back against the uphill wall of the tent, knife in one hand, bear spray in the other, listening the wind scream through the tower railing overhead. Hours passed. My legs cramped. My mouth went dry. I pissed in an empty water bottle because there was no way I was unzipping that door. Cold crept in till I was shaking, but I didn't dare move to pull the sleeping bag around me. I just sat and waited for the sky to go from black to less black. First gray came around 5:30. I risked the light one last time. The circle was empty. Grass lay flat and dewed like nothing heavier than rabbits had walked it. No prints leading away, no broken stems, nothing. I waited another half hour till real dawn, then crawled out stiff and sore, half expecting him to be standing behind the tent. They weren't. Just a bald stretching empty under pink sky, wind still blowing hard, tower creaking like an old ship. I broke camp in record time, didn't even boil coffee. Showed up my pack and started down the north side of the bald toward Wine Spring, walking fast without looking back. Took me 3 more days to finish the trail, but I never camped high again. Stuck to the shelters with other people, kept a fire going all night, slept with a headlamp around my neck like a necklace I couldn't take off. Rangers I told just smiled and said I'd seen elk or maybe shadows from clouds. One old fella at Weser laughed and told me the Cherokee used to say why y'all belonged to the star people and white men weren't welcome after moonset. I laughed too, but it came not wrong. I still hike, still love these mountains more than any person alive. But I don't solo overnight above 4,000 feet anymore. And I never ever trust a headlamp to show me what's really out there. Because light doesn't scare the dark away. Sometimes it just teaches the dark exactly how far it needs to stand back to watch you without being seen. And some nights, when the wind is up and the power goes out, I sit in my house with every lamp burning and wonder if they're still out there in the absolute black, waiting patient for the next fool who thinks a circle of LED white makes him safe. Because distance is just a suggestion when something already knows your shape by heart.